What if I told you that everything you've been told about addiction is wrong? That the real cause isn't weakness, lack of willpower, or even the substance itself? Carl Jung, one of history's greatest minds, discovered something so profound about addiction that it completely revolutionizes how we understand this devastating condition. And here's the shocking part. This discovery was made nearly 100 years ago, yet most treatment centers today still ignore it. Picture this. You're struggling with an addiction. Maybe it's alcohol, drugs, gambling, or even something as seemingly harmless as social media. Everyone around you says the same thing. Just stop. Use your willpower. Be stronger. But deep down, you know it's not that simple. You've tried to stop countless times. You've made promises to yourself, to your family, to God. Yet here you are, back in the same destructive cycle, feeling more broken than before. Jung understood something that modern medicine is only beginning to grasp. He realized that addiction isn't about the substance at all. It's about something far deeper, something that cuts to the very core of human existence. In his famous correspondence with Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, Jung revealed what he called the spiritual thirst, a desperate hunger for wholeness that drives people to seek transcendence through chemicals. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Jung discovered that when someone becomes intoxicated, something extraordinary happens in their psyche. The chemical doesn't just mask pain or provide temporary relief. It actually removes the cause of their inner torment, at least temporarily. It dissolves the fragmented parts of their personality, creating an illusory sense of wholeness that feels more real than anything they've ever experienced. Imagine feeling complete for the first time in your life. All your inner conflicts, your shame, your sense of being fundamentally broken, suddenly gone. You experience what Jung called numinous wholeness, a godlike state where there's no separation between you and the universe. Of course, you want to experience it again. Of course, you'll do anything to return to that state. This isn't weakness. This is the most natural human response imaginable. Jung observed this firsthand during his time at the Burghölzli Psychiatric Hospital, where 13% of patients suffered from what they called alcohol poisoning. But unlike his colleagues who saw these people as morally deficient, Jung saw something else entirely. He saw souls crying out for meaning, for connection, for a sense of the sacred that had been stripped away by modern life. The dark truth Jung uncovered is this: addiction is actually a misdirected spiritual quest. Every person struggling with addiction is unconsciously seeking the same thing: union with something greater than themselves. They're trying to fill what Jung called the God-shaped hole in their psyche. The tragedy is that they're using the wrong tools. Think about ancient cultures for a moment. Psychoactive substances were reserved for sacred rituals, used to connect with the divine under the guidance of shamans and spiritual leaders. These experiences were transformative, meaningful, and integrated into a larger spiritual framework. Today, we've stripped away all the sacred context and left people to navigate these powerful altered states alone, without guidance, without meaning, without community. This is why willpower fails. This is why traditional treatment often doesn't work. You can't solve a spiritual problem with a medical solution. You can't fill a God-shaped hole with therapy sessions and medication alone. Jung understood that the addiction itself was a symptom of a much deeper crisis: the loss of the sacred in modern life. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. Our society has created the perfect conditions for addiction to flourish. We've become disconnected from nature, from community, from any sense of transcendent meaning. We've replaced rituals with routines, myths with materialism, and wonder with worry. Is it any surprise that people are desperately seeking transcendence wherever they can find it? The pharmaceutical companies don't want you to know this. The treatment industry doesn't want you to know this. Because if you understood that your addiction was actually a spiritual crisis, disguised as a medical problem, You might start looking for real solutions instead of quick fixes. Jung's revelation was so radical that even he was afraid to speak about it openly. He worried about being misunderstood, about being dismissed by the scientific community. But the truth couldn't be contained. His insights laid the foundation for Alcoholics Anonymous and every successful recovery program since. The question is, are you ready to hear the rest of this truth? Because what Jung discovered next will challenge everything you think you know about healing, about spirituality, and about the incredible power hidden within your own psyche. The journey we're about to take together might just save your life. Now that you understand addiction is a spiritual crisis, let me reveal the second dark truth Jung discovered, one that will shake you to your core. He found that every addicted person is actually living a lie. Not the obvious lies they tell others about their using, but a fundamental lie about who they are at the deepest level. Jung called this the persona trap. You see, from the moment we're born, society begins molding us into acceptable shapes. We learn to hide our true nature, our wild impulses, our shadow self. We create what Jung termed a persona, a mask we wear to fit in, to be loved, to survive. But here's the terrifying part. Over time, we forget it's just a mask. We start believing the persona is who we are. Think about your own life for a moment. How much of who you present to the world is really you? How much is just what you think others want to see? If you're honest, and I mean brutally honest, you'll realize that you've been living as a stranger to yourself for years, maybe decades. This is where addiction becomes inevitable. When you're disconnected from your authentic self, when you're constantly performing a role that isn't really you, an unbearable tension builds up inside. It's like being stretched on a medieval torture device, pulled in opposite directions until something has to snap. The substance becomes the only thing that allows you to drop the mask, even temporarily. But Jung discovered something even more disturbing. He found that the very qualities we try hardest to hide, our anger, our sexuality, our selfishness, our darkness, these aren't bugs in the human system. They're features. They contain tremendous power and energy that, when properly integrated, become sources of creativity, passion, and authentic strength. However, our culture has taught us to fear these aspects of ourselves. We've been conditioned to believe that good people don't have dark thoughts, that spiritual people don't feel rage, that successful people don't struggle with shame. So we split ourselves in half, keeping only the acceptable parts conscious while banishing everything else to what Jung called the shadow. Here's where it gets truly sinister. The shadow doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. It grows stronger in the darkness, feeding on our denial. And eventually, it finds a way to express itself. For many people, that expression comes through addiction. The substance becomes a gateway that allows the shadow to emerge, often in destructive ways. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly in his patients. The mild-mannered businessman who becomes violent when drunk. The perfect mother who transforms into someone unrecognizable on pills. The spiritual seeker who lies and manipulates to get their next fix. These aren't different people. They're the same person finally expressing their disowned parts, but without any conscious control or integration. This is why traditional therapy often fails. It focuses on managing symptoms rather than addressing the fundamental split in the psyche. It tries to strengthen the persona's control over the shadow, which only increases the internal pressure. It's like trying to hold down the lid on a boiling pot. Eventually, something's going to explode. Jung realized that true healing requires something far more radical. Embracing the shadow, not acting it out destructively, but consciously acknowledging and integrating these disowned parts of ourselves. This process, which he called individuation, is perhaps the most challenging journey a human being can undertake. But here's what makes this process so difficult in our current culture. We live in a world that profits from your disconnection from your authentic self. The advertising industry spends billions convincing you that you're not enough as you are. Social media platforms are designed to keep you comparing yourself to others, maintaining the persona performance. Even many spiritual and self-help movements encourage you to transcend or eliminate your negative emotions rather than integrate them. The pharmaceutical industry has turned this disconnection into a gold mine. Instead of helping people reconnect with their authentic selves, they offer chemical solutions that numb the pain of living as a stranger to yourself. They've medicalized the natural human response to an inauthentic life, labeling it as depression, anxiety, or addiction disorder. Jung saw through this deception. He understood that what we call mental illness is often the psyche's attempt to restore balance, to force us to pay attention to the parts of ourselves we've been ignoring. The addiction, the depression, the anxiety, these are not enemies to be defeated. They're messengers carrying vital information about what needs to be healed. But the most disturbing truth Jung uncovered is this: most people would rather remain sick than face their authentic selves. The persona, even though it's killing them slowly, feels safer than the unknown territory of their true nature. They've become so identified with their mask that removing it feels like death. This is why recovery is so much more than just stopping the substance use. It's a complete death and rebirth process. The person you thought you were has to die for your authentic self to emerge. And that process is terrifying because you don't know who you'll be on the other side. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, a period where everything you thought you knew about yourself crumbles away. It's in this darkness, this void, that the real work begins. Because only when you've lost everything false can you discover what's genuinely true about who you are. The question is, are you brave enough to meet your shadow? Are you willing to discover the parts of yourself you've been running from? Because what Jung found next will show you exactly how to transform your greatest weaknesses into your most powerful strengths.
If this video is making sense to you, remember to subscribe to the channel. It helps us get better with every video.
Here's where Jung's discovery becomes truly revolutionary, and where most people give up because the truth is too uncomfortable to face. He found that the very thing you're most ashamed of, the aspect of yourself you'd rather die than reveal, contains the key to your liberation. But accessing this power requires you to do something that goes against every instinct. You must befriend your enemy. Jung called this process shadow integration, and it's the most dangerous psychological work you can undertake. Why dangerous? Because when you start acknowledging the parts of yourself you've spent years denying, everything changes. Your relationships shift. Your career might crumble. People who knew the old you might not recognize who you're becoming. This is why most people choose to stay addicted rather than face this transformation. But here's what Jung discovered that will blow your mind. The energy you've been using to suppress your shadow is the same energy that fuels your addiction. Think about it. How much mental and emotional energy do you spend every day maintaining your persona? How exhausting is it to constantly monitor yourself, to make sure you're saying the right things, feeling the right emotions, being the right person? That exhaustion isn't just psychological, it's spiritual. You're literally draining your life force by living as someone you're not. And when you're that depleted, that disconnected from your authentic power, of course you need something external to fill the void. The substance becomes a substitute for the energy you're bleeding out through your false self. Jung observed this pattern in every addicted person he treated. They weren't weak. They were exhausted from the monumental effort of being someone they weren't. The addiction was actually their psyche's attempt to reclaim some of that lost energy, even if it was through destructive means. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. Jung discovered that when someone begins to integrate their shadow, when they start owning their anger, their sexuality, their selfishness, their darkness, something miraculous happens. They don't become more destructive. They become more powerful, more creative, more alive, more genuinely loving. This seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? We've been taught that acknowledging our dark side will make us bad people. But Jung found the opposite. When you own your capacity for destruction, you gain the power to choose construction. When you acknowledge your selfishness, you can choose genuine generosity. When you embrace your anger, you can access righteous passion for justice. The people who cause the most damage in the world aren't those who've integrated their shadow. They're those who are unconsciously possessed by it. The politician who preaches family values while having affairs. The spiritual teacher who abuses their power. The parent who claims to love their children while emotionally destroying them. These people aren't evil. They're unconscious. Their shadow is running the show while they maintain the illusion of being good. Jung realized that true morality isn't about being perfect. It's about being conscious. It's about knowing your capacity for both good and evil and choosing consciously in each moment. This is what he called individuation, becoming a whole person rather than a half-person pretending to be good. But our culture has made this process nearly impossible. We live in a world of extremes. You're either good or bad, successful or a failure, healthy or sick. There's no room for the messy complexity of being human. Social media has amplified this to an insane degree. Everyone's presenting their highlight reel while hiding their struggles, creating a collective delusion that everyone else has it figured out. This cultural split is what Jung called the neurosis of our time. We've created a society that demands perfection while denying the very human experiences that make us whole. Is it any wonder that addiction rates are skyrocketing? We're literally driving people insane with impossible standards. Jung saw this coming decades ago. He predicted that as we became more technologically advanced, we'd become more psychologically primitive. He foresaw a world where people would be more connected to their devices than to their own souls. He understood that without a conscious relationship to our inner world, we'd become slaves to whatever promised to fill the void. The pharmaceutical industry has capitalized on this perfectly. Instead of helping people integrate their shadow, they offer medications that numb the discomfort of living an inauthentic life. They've turned the natural human process of individuation into a medical condition that requires lifelong treatment. But here's what they don't want you to know. Your symptoms aren't the problem. They're the solution trying to emerge. Your depression is your psyche's way of forcing you to slow down and look inward. Your anxiety is your authentic self trying to break through the prison of your persona. Your addiction is your soul's desperate attempt to experience transcendence. Jung understood that these symptoms aren't enemies to be defeated. They're allies trying to guide you home to yourself. But working with them requires a completely different approach than what mainstream psychology offers. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to embrace the full spectrum of human experience. The most profound thing Jung discovered is this. The goal isn't to eliminate your darkness. It's to make it conscious. When you can own your capacity for destruction, you gain the power to create. When you can acknowledge your selfishness, you can choose genuine love. When you can embrace your mortality, you can truly live. This is why Jung's approach to addiction is so radical. He doesn't try to fix you. He helps you become whole. He doesn't eliminate your symptoms. He helps you understand their message. He doesn't make you a better person. He helps you become a real person. But the final truth Jung discovered is the most shocking of all. And it's this truth that holds the key to permanent recovery, to genuine transformation, to a life of authentic power and meaning. Are you ready to hear it? Here's the final and most shocking truth Jung discovered, the one that changes everything. He found that addiction isn't just a personal problem. It's a collective shadow, a symptom of our entire civilization's spiritual bankruptcy. And here's the terrifying part. Our culture is deliberately designed to create addicts because addicted people are profitable, controllable, and predictable. Think about this for a moment. We live in a society that has systematically destroyed every traditional source of meaning and transcendence. We've dismantled religious communities, broken apart extended families, eliminated rites of passage, and replaced sacred rituals with consumer experiences. We've created what Jung called the wasteland, a spiritually barren landscape where people are starving for meaning while being fed an endless diet of distractions. Jung realized that individual addiction is just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath lies a collective addiction to materialism, to consumption, to the illusion that external things can fill internal voids. We've become a civilization of addicts, desperately seeking transcendence through shopping, social media, entertainment, work, relationships, anything except the one place where it can actually be found, within ourselves. But here's where Jung's insight becomes truly revolutionary. He discovered that the cure for addiction isn't individual, it's collective. You can't heal in isolation because the wound isn't just personal. It's cultural, generational, archetypal. This is why traditional therapy often fails. It tries to fix individuals within a system that's fundamentally broken. Jung understood that true healing requires what he called the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between opposites until a third way emerges. In addiction recovery, this means holding the tension between your addicted self and your recovering self until your authentic self can emerge. But this process can't happen in a vacuum. It requires community, ritual, and a shared understanding of the sacred. This is why Alcoholics Anonymous works when other treatments fail. It's not just about stopping drinking. It's about creating a new form of spiritual community. The meetings become rituals. The steps become a modern form of initiation. The sponsorship creates the elder-student relationship that traditional cultures use to guide people through transformation. But Jung saw something even deeper. He realized that people in recovery often become the most psychologically sophisticated individuals in our culture. Why? Because they've been forced to confront their shadow, to face their mortality, to surrender their ego's control. They've undergone what amounts to a shamanic initiation, death and rebirth through suffering. This is why Jung called addiction the sacred disease, not because it's good, but because it forces people into the kind of spiritual crisis that can lead to genuine transformation. The addicted person is actually closer to enlightenment than the person who's never questioned their life, never faced their darkness, never surrendered their illusions of control. Here's what this means for you personally. If you're struggling with addiction, you're not broken. You're being initiated. Your pain isn't punishment, it's preparation. Your bottom isn't your end, it's your beginning. But only if you understand what's really happening and work with the process instead of against it. Jung discovered that the people who recover most completely are those who learn to see their addiction as a spiritual teacher rather than a medical condition. They understand that their substance of choice was never the real problem. It was a misguided attempt to solve the problem of existential emptiness. The real work begins when you stop trying to manage your addiction and start asking deeper questions. Who am I really? What is my purpose? How can I serve something greater than myself? What does my soul actually need to feel nourished? These aren't therapy questions. They're spiritual questions that require spiritual answers. But here's the most profound thing Jung realized. The very qualities that make someone susceptible to addiction, sensitivity, intensity, the capacity for transcendent experience, these are also the qualities of the mystic, the artist, the healer, the visionary. Your addiction isn't a sign that you're weak. It's a sign that you're spiritually gifted, but haven't learned how to channel that gift constructively. This completely reframes recovery. Instead of trying to become normal, you're learning to become who you really are. Instead of managing a disease, you're developing your spiritual gifts. Instead of fixing what's wrong with you, you're discovering what's right with you that's been misdirected. Jung's final insight was this: the goal isn't to eliminate suffering, it's to find meaning in it. When you can understand your addiction as part of your soul's journey toward wholeness, everything changes. Your pain becomes purposeful. Your struggle becomes sacred. Your recovery becomes a form of service to others who are still trapped in the illusion that they're broken. This is why people in long-term recovery often become the most compassionate, wise, and spiritually mature individuals you'll ever meet. They've been through the fire and emerged transformed. They've faced their demons and learned to dance with them. They've died to who they thought they were and been reborn as who they really are. The question isn't whether you can recover, it's whether you're ready to be transformed. Because what Jung discovered 100 years ago is still true today. Your addiction is not your curse. It's your calling. Your bottom is not your end. It's your beginning. Your pain is not your punishment. It's your preparation for a life of meaning, purpose, and authentic power that you can't even imagine from where you are right now. The dark truth Jung discovered isn't that addiction is incurable. It's that our entire culture is addicted to avoiding the very experiences that would heal us. But you don't have to wait for society to change. You can begin your own transformation right now, today, in this moment. Your journey home to yourself starts with a single step: the willingness to see your addiction not as your enemy, but as your teacher.